Hey everyone, welcome to Tathastu. I hope you all are doing very good. Well, today we are going to talk about our neighbor with whom our relations have not been very good for last few years, our neighbor with whom we had instances of Galwan and Doklam, and the same neighbor, the same China is right now going through some very acute financial crisis, very acute economic crisis. So today we are going to talk about the deflationary scenario which is there in China and its effects for the whole globe, for the whole economy, and for India. That is it a positive move or something which is also negative for India? Okay, so let's start with it. But before going into the topic and before going into the details of the topic, just to let you know that how acute or how devastating the scenario is there in China. Few hours back, just a couple of hours before recording this video, the Chinese authorities reportedly said to the major companies of China to not sell their stocks in the market, to not sell their shares in the share market, because the whole scenario in the share markets of the China is very weak, very fragile. Okay, and the main reason, the main idea behind all this is that the economy, the whole of Chinese economy, which is largely dependent on the real estate, because in China 30% of the economy is dependent on real estate. In India it is 11%. In United States it is 4.5%. And couple of years back from now, in September 2021, there was a Evergrande crisis, after which there was all ho halla that the whole Chinese economy and eventually the global economy will collapse, because Evergrande is a Lehman Brother movement for the China. But eventually somehow the authoritarian regime in the China had a hold on it. But 2 years down the line, there is couple of days from now, just day before yesterday, there is another economic collapse in China, another economically very important company collapse in China, that is Country Garden. Now the all ho halla, the all scary stuff which have been said regarding Evergrande 2 years back, for 2 years from now, this situation is more scary, because that company was having some 700 odd projects in whole of China, and this company is handling around 3000 projects in China. Okay, so there is situation, there is a crisis in China, and it is so severe that the Chinese president has said something like eat the bitterness to its youth and to the people of China, which means that you should be ready to handle the hard blows which is coming towards you. Every economy has to face these hard moments, so just be ready to face it. He's broadly talking like a spiritual guru and giving some gyan to the people of the Chinese economy, to the people of this Chinese state. Okay, so we are going to talk about all the deflationary scenario which is there in China and how has China reached there. But before starting all these typical conventional things, there are some terminologies which are related to the price rise. Okay, so there are broadly many things like stagflation, there is hyperinflation, there is cost push inflation. I don't want you to go in there because the time is limited, but I want you to know these two terms specifically. Okay, inflation and deflation, because our topic article is broadly related to this. Okay, so what is inflation? There are two broad definitions. Inflation is a sustained increase in the general price level, or a continuous increase in the general price level of goods and services in an economy over time, leading to reduced purchasing power of the economy. Okay, so last year the prices of the tomatoes was around 40 odd rupees, 40 to 50 rupees. Okay, this year, in this time period, in this month, the price of tomatoes is, everybody knows it, it's more than 200, 210, 20, 230, 250, around this much. Okay, so this is inflation. It is inflation with the price of the good skyrockets, and there is a sustained growth in the price of the things, of the goods and the services. So this is inflation, and because of that, because of all these things, the value of the money depreciates, the purchasing power of the people who are having that money depreciates. Just another example, last year maybe in 100 rupees you were getting 10 tomatoes. Today in same 100 rupees you're getting 5 tomatoes. Okay, so the value of that money depreciated, the value of that money devalued. Now, second is deflation. Deflation is sustained decrease in the general price level of goods and services, often resulting in reduced consumer spending and economic stagnation. Now, this is a situation which is there in China. in India and around the world, around the globe, especially after COVID-19, after all the energy crisis which is there in the whole of the globe, and the Ukraine-Russia war. After this, the inflation has just skyrocketed in US, in UK, in Europe, in India, everywhere, except China, because the way they handled their economy and the way handled their country in COVID times was different. So the result is coming out in a bit different way. Okay, so the whole world is facing inflation, but China is facing deflation. Deflation is that the people, there's a competition in inflationary market, that people have money in their pockets, but in deflationary market, firstly people don't have money in their pockets, and secondly they don't prioritize spending money in day-to-day things. Okay, so they want to save money for something which is for those things which are higher in the list of their priority list. Okay, so this is inflation and deflation broadly. So historically, the term inflation and deflation were linked to the changes in the monetary supply, with inflation representing a rise and a deflation a fall in the money supply. Broadly, this is the whole scenario. In inflation, there is liquidity in the market. In deflation, the monetary system, the liquidity rise up in the market. Okay, people don't have that much opportunity or that much options to spend on the products they want. Okay, so this is inflation and deflation. And China's recent bout of deflation, marked by a decline in consumer prices for the first time in over 2 years, has sparked the debate about its implications and about its causes, because its implications are far reaching. We'll talk about the causes of it, but the implications are also far reaching, because for last couple of years, Chinese economy, and for last couple of decades actually, for last 20-25 years, Chinese economy is something which is largely intertwined with the economies of Asia, Africa, Europe, US. So anything which happens in China will have an effect over whole of the globe. Okay, so the concerns associated with the deflation, there are a few concerns which are associated with deflation. There are many concerns, but broadly I jotted down three: the economic slowdown, demand supply dynamics changes, and the lack of resource utilization. Okay, there's a lack of resource utilization in deflationary economy. So what is economics? How does the economic slowdown comes in? Many economists view deflation as an indicator of dwindling demand of goods and services, potentially leading to an economic slowdown. Now, what is this? This is something which I tell my students about when they ask me, sir, for history, shall we read Spectrum or I am willing to read Bipin Chandra? And in that moment, I tell them कि पहले जरूरत पूरी कर लो, फिर शौक पूरे कर लेना. Okay? In deflationary economy, the people of that economy or the people of that state feel in the same way, because with deflation there comes another D, that is deleveraging. Now, what is deleveraging? Deleveraging is paying off your debts. In China, what is happening is the Chinese debt to GDP is 160%. Okay, the Chinese debt to GDP is 160%, and the people of China, they had their aspirations, they took their loans, they had their jobs, and suppose you have 1 lakh, you are earning 1 lakh rupees. Okay, you took your loans, you bought a car on loan, you bought a house on loan, and you imagine that right now I'm earning around 1 lakh rupees. After a few years down the line, after a few years, I'll be earning 2 lakh, 3 lakh rupees, so I'll pay this debt. But suddenly your job goes. That's what's happening in China, because in China, around 20% of the employed youth, 20% of the youth which was employed is now unemployed. And the Chinese youth is not just some next door graduates of Asia. No, they cracked the examinations, which are considered one of the toughest examinations in Asia and in the world. The university examinations, which is considered the Gaokao examination, is one of the toughest examination in the world. And when the Chinese youth crack that examination, they are considered one of the most talented and skilled people, and 20% of those skilled people are unemployed. Okay, so because of all that thing, they lost their job and they lost their purchasing power. So they are looking for some priorities. They are looking to save something for their houses, for their children, for everything. So they are not willing to spend those money in day-to-day lives. Okay, so there is the economic slowdown. Eventually it is leading to some economic slowdown. Now there is some change in the demand supply dynamics. Falling prices may prompt consumer to delay the purchases and hampering the demand and triggering a ripple effect in the economy. Now, whenever the people of that particular economy, when the people of the Chinese economy are thinking that they'll delay some purchases, they'll delay the buying of the car, buying of the scooter. In that way, they are hampering the demand, and when the demand gets hampered, the production gets hampered. And when the productions in the companies and in the manufacturing companies get hampered, the people who are involved in manufacturing those products, those services, they lose their job. Okay, so this is the whole chain. Economics is like economics has a domino effect. Something which happens has its impact on things which are closely or directly or indirectly related to it. So if the demand or the purchasing power comes down, so the demands come down. If the demands comes down, so the people who are manufacturing for those demands, or who are people who are catering those demands, they get affected and their jobs get affected. So this whole scenario, so the unemployment comes from here, the 20% unemployment rate comes from here, the demand supply dynamics which gets changed. Okay, and the third reason and the third concern is lack of resource utilization. A certain level of inflation is deemed necessary for optimal resource utilization, ensuring full economic potential is realized. That is why the whole of federal bank and the central banks and all the, be it RBI, be it any central bank in the world, they want their inflationary rate to be between 2 to 4%. Why? Because certain level of inflation is required to achieve what is needed to be achieved. Okay, the way economy needs to be run, for that there's certain level of inflation is required. Okay, now varied perspectives on deflation. Everything in your mains answer writing, or when you're writing your mains answers, you need to give different perspectives. So there is a different perspective of positive instances. Well, deflation is considered a gloom scenario, doom and gloom scenario. Okay, but there have been instances that in past, there's a country, Japan, and Japan had a robust economic growth for few years, and in that, the way Japan was experiencing growth, and the way Japan was going through, in that scenario, in that situation, the deflationary scenarios came to Japan, but somehow it handled it, somehow it managed it. But at that time, Japanese economy was very big compared to the today's Chinese economy in purchasing power parity, or in those terms. Okay, so somehow Japan managed it. There is no sure shot reason. This is not a sure shot thing ki if Japan manages, somehow Chinese economy will also going to manage it. Secondly, the economic crisis. Deflation can arise during the economic crisis when the cautious spending and resource allocation occurs. As I told you, with deflation, there's another word which comes in, which is deleveraging. Why the deleveraging comes in? Because there is debt on the person. Person took debt. Now today, the way he was getting income when the debt has been taken, today is not the same situation. Today, the instances and the scenario has been different. So the person has prioritized something. He knows that if he's going to spend on something which is luxurious, which is momentary, the cost benefit of it is not so good, so the person is avoiding that thing. And to avoid that thing, if from there comes the resource allocation, and from there comes the cautious spending, all those things. Okay, so the consumer demand and the prices, some economists argue that the consumer demand dictate the prices rather than the other way around. Now there's some people say that because the price of the things are going high, so there is inflation. Because the prices of the things are going low, so there is an inflation. It's other way around. Because the situation in an economy and the way, because people have money in their pockets, so there is inflation in the economy. Because people don't have money in their pockets and they don't have the mentality to spend it, or the situation to spend it, because they are in debt. So in this way, all this deflationary and inflationary circumstances creates. Okay, now Chinese deflationary scenario, कि how China reached at this point, यहाँ पे China किस तरीके से आया. So there are broadly three reasons: policy measures, property sector turmoil, and some complex factors are also there. Because in China, usually when deflationary economy comes in, why it is complex, let me tell you that. Usually it is considered that whenever an economy enters in a deflationary scenario, there is something called liquidity issue. Okay, but in China there is no liquidity issue, because central banks are constantly lowering their interest rates. By lowering their interest rates, they are providing them monetary support, they're infusing money supply, they're infusing money in the market. And by doing this, there is no liquidity crunch from the government side. But the people of the China are so much in debt that they have to save their money. Okay, and then because there is no jobs, so then there is this all complex factor, and this all complex situation has arisen. Okay, now the policy measures. China's central bank maintained low interest rates to stimulate the demand amid the post-pandemic recovery. Chinese economy is the only economy. Chinese central bank is the only central bank which is going with the low interest rate. Now, what is low interest rate? Suppose I took up some loan of 1 lakh rupees, and my bank is giving me that loan on a interest rate of 10%. Okay. Similarly, you're taking that loan, 1 lakh rupee loan at 5%. So you have to pay only 5%. I have to pay 10%. The rest 5% which is there with you, you're going to spend it for chola kulcha, for golgappa, for tikki, for pizza. By spending that 5%, and crores of you are spending that 5%, not saving or not giving to the bank, you have liquidity and you're spending it in the market. By spending it in the market, there's the whole churning of that money, and then there's taxes which will go to the government. But so by lowering the interest rate, this whole situation arises that the monetary supply of the money revolves in the market, but it is not happening in China. Despite taking these positive measures, these positive policy measures, the result is not that optimistic. Okay. And second is property sector turmoil. China's pre-pandemic property sector challenges affecting GDP contribution and may be a root cause of the current deflationary trend. This is the main cause why China is collapsing, because as I have told you that in China 30% of the Chinese GDP is reliant on this property sector. It's not like in India, that in India there are some builders are popular in Delhi, some are popular in Gurgaon, some in Noida, some in Pune, some in Nasik. So there are sectoral things. Okay. But in China, these are huge, these are big companies who have their big projects all over the China. As I told you that in September 2021, there was one company, Evergrande. They were managing 700 odd projects in whole of China, and when they collapsed on their debt, because they, like common Chinese people, they are also in debt. Okay. And when they collapsed on their debt, there was all halla that the Chinese economy is going to be derailed. 2 years down the line, there's another company, Country Garden, which this company was having only 700 projects. This company is the biggest company in China, biggest real estate company in China, and it was managing 3,000 projects, and now this company also collapsed. Okay. So with 30% of the economy is on stake, and the Chinese geopolitical scenario which is situated on OBOR, One Belt One Road Initiative, BRI, all of it is dependent on the infrastructure making. Okay. So China literally pushes for infrastructure, and now all these policies are coming to haunt them. Okay. So the property sector turmoil is there for real, and these complex scenarios were there which we talked about. Now you must be thinking that something which happens in China, something which happens in India, something which happens in around anywhere in the world with the major economies. Chinese economy is the second largest economy in the world. US is one of the largest economy in the world. Even it was expected that Chinese economy would take over the US economy by 2035. So if you have a question that this deflationary scenario will have any impact on Indian economy or in the Indian country, will it have an impact? So the answer is yes. Here is the chart. You can have a quick read about it. So there have been periods of 1930, 1950 to 60, 1970, 1990s, and the subprime crisis or global financial crisis of 2008 and 2009. In all these scenarios, in all these situations, when the deflation came, it severely hit the Indian economy, and this is the data of last 100 years. Okay. So this will going to affect the markets. Some are saying it will affect it positively, Indian markets positively, some are saying negatively. So we'll see to it. Okay. So let's have a look about it. How will it impact the Indian economy? Now there are some positive impacts. People are talking about some positive impacts, that if Chinese economy is sidelined, then it will have some positive impact on the Indian economy. One is these two things are interlinked: the cheaper imports and the low input cost. Okay. So if the Chinese goods become cheaper due to deflation, it could lead to lower import cost of India, benefiting consumers and businesses that rely on Chinese product. So this video has been recorded in Karol Bagh. This is getting recorded in Karol Bagh, and there are many businessmen in Karol Bagh and in Old Rajendra Nagar who go to China and who have their businesses with China. Okay. And they get their imports from China. If they get some cheaper imports from China, then it is good for their business and eventually good for the Indian economy, because they'll be able to sell those products at a cheaper price. Similarly, low cost import. Suppose there is a car which is getting manufactured in Noida or in Pune, and its components are getting imported from Beijing or Guangzhou or some other city from the China. If the input cost is lower and the parts which are getting from China are at a cheaper price rate, the components which are getting from China are cheaper, then the assemblage of that whole car or the manufacturing of that whole car would be at a cheaper cost. Okay, so the people who will be getting that car, or the price of that car would be quite cheaper. So reduced prices for raw material and intermediate goods from China could lower the production of Indian industries that depend on these inputs. Okay. Now, thirdly, global supply chains. If the Chinese deflation reduces the cost of the production within global supply chain, the Indian businesses which are integrated to these chains will get directly benefited from it. See, so these are few things which have like, if China is going through some severe economic crisis, is specifically going through deflation, then these are some things which will directly impact, directly positively affect the Indian markets. There is another thing which is improved trade balance. We have a very bad current account deficit. We have our current account deficit is huge, and all thanks to China. And to reduce that deficit, we have been trying to reduce our dependence on China for last few years. Okay, so with a cheaper Chinese imports can contribute to more favorable trade balance to India, specifically if it leads to reduced import bills. With cheaper imports, with cheaper components coming in India from China, there would be reduced import bills, hence eventually leading to better CAD, current account deficit. Okay, but as there are, like, फूल के साथ कांटा भी होता है, और ये चीज लगी रहती है कि जहाँ to balance out all the positives there are negatives. Similarly, with all the positives, with some positives, there are few negatives with this impact, and the negative side, let me assure you, is greater. The negative side is so greater that just Chinese data came just day before yesterday, and when the reports were coming, the American markets were going down. They were nosediving. It was because of the Chinese records were bad. And today itself, the Indian economy started, the Indian share market gapped down with 300 points, like 200 points, around 200 points. Okay, so all these things, economy is like that house of cards. Economy has a domino effect, so it will have its negative impact on it. Okay, so the first negative impact would be export competition. Okay, the cheaper Chinese exports due to deflation could increase competition from Indian exports in international markets, potentially affecting certain Indian industries. Okay, so Chinese economy and Indian economy both are developing economies, and as a developing economy, both want to export their items. Okay, but if because of less demand, the products which are there in China get sold at a cheaper price, so they'll be exported at a cheaper price, and if they get exported at a cheaper price, then there would be a export competition, because we also want to export, and if the US market and the UK market will be having an option to get the same product at a cheaper price from Chinese market, where will they buy it? The answer is obvious. Okay, so export competition, one is export competition, another is import dumping. Okay, a flood of cheap Chinese goods into Indian market could harm domestic producers, leading to job losses and economic strain. Okay, so I know how many of you are aware of the fact that, but few years down the line, there was a policy decision by government of India that Chinese authority want to dump their steel, because they might have also saw that ad when where Pankaj Tripathi is saying कि अभी तो ये इंडिया, बढ़ते इंडिया की कहानी है जहां धूल मिट्टी उड़ रही है सब. ओके, and to make the houses कि इंडिया जो बढ़े for the construction and all those things, steel is required and all those basic infrastructure things are required. Okay, so they were dumping their steel at a very minimal price. Okay, and it will directly affect to the steel companies which are there in India, which is in competition with the Chinese economy. So like that steel scenario, there would be a scenario if the price of the products would be reduced in China, and if they are getting exported at a lesser price to Europe and America, it will be exported at a lesser price to India also. Okay, so there would be import dumping in India. Investment flows. A slowdown in China's economy caused by deflation might lead to reduced investor confidence and affect FDI flows to in India. Okay, because Chinese economy and Indian economy, as I said, that 21st century it is repeatedly said that 21st century is of about Chindia. Okay, China plus India is Chindia, and both will export their things to the developed markets. And if there is any doom and gloom scenario in the developing economies, if the confidence of the investors get shackled, they'll be having their doubts to invest in India also. So they'll run away for some secure bonds. Okay, then there is currency effect. If Chinese central bank devalues its currency to boost the export in response to deflation, it could lead to stronger Indian rupee, impacting the India's export competitiveness. Similarly, the export competitiveness is there, the export competition, because they want their if they devalue the Chinese economy, the Chinese government devalue their currency, so the value of Indian currencies would be higher. And as I told you, when the ultimate product with a price tag reaches to UK and US at a certain price level, and the same product is at a cheaper price from China, then the answer is obvious, they'll buy from China. Okay, so that's why it has been said, it's the whole conclusion of all this crisis which is going on, and the in current scenario today itself, the whole of world economy is dwindling, and the share prices of the economies are dwindling. And the way Tesla, Elon Musk is very popular now with Dogecoin, and with Tesla and Twitter, he's very much popular. For last 3 days, in last 2 days, the Tesla car making, or the Chinese production company of Tesla, has reduced the price of those cars which have been sold in the Chinese market 3 times, because they know that the demand in China is very weak. So they have to reduce the price of the car, because the production is on, and the cars are getting made, and the cars are getting built, so you need to sell it at certain level. So if the profit is getting reduced, then okay, then let it be there in the market. Okay, so what would be the conclusion? The China's counter with deflation amidst effort to boost the demand and stabilize its economy presents a multifaceted challenge. As I told you, there was a phrase that when America sneezes, the whole of world will catch the cold. Now, why do we say this? Because the weight of the American economy is very high. The weight of the America itself is very high, and that is because of its strong economy. Similarly, for last 25 years, be it the Australia's mineral exports, or the US and China exports to each other, everything, China has its links with India, with Europe, with Africa, with Australia, with US. So China is not only one of the biggest exporters, one of the biggest producers of the thing, but it is one of the biggest importers. So it is the biggest player in the current global economy. So anything which is of such a scale will impact everyone. Okay, so understanding the nuances of the deflation and its interaction with demand supply dynamics and China's unique economic landscape are vital for China to solve this issue. While the economists around the world have a similar suggestion for the whole Chinese authority is pump the money in the market, just the way Donald Trump has done. During the COVID times, is all the American people were sitting at their homes, and the Chinese Federal Bank was repeatedly printing the money, and they were giving it to the people, and they wanted them to spend. China worked on a different scenario. They closed one part of their city, they opened another part of their city. They tried to work in a different level, and they were thinking that inflation is a big problem. Inflation is a problem. Printing money has been a problem. That is why we all have been listening about all these bitcoins and everything, because they claim to solve all these problems which have been there for last few years, the central bank and their money printing things. Okay, China tried to do all these things. China tried to get away with this thing, but their way of functioning negatively impacted the economy of the China and the employment of the Chinese people. Okay, so they need to understand the uniqueness, because we talked about this. They don't have liquidity crunch. The central bank of China is monetarily available. The monetary system and the interest rates are low there. So it is not about the monetary system. The landscape and the economic landscape of China is different. It is the whole devaluing or the whole this deflation scenario in China is because of the deleveraging thing, because of the high debt ratio which is there in China, and that debt is 160% of the GDP. Okay, so China need to navigate its path forward. Policymakers must consider that the interplay of factors, including the property sector's impact and broader economic goals. People have to, all these Chinese people need to understand that the reason behind all these things is there is unique, their uniqueness, the uniqueness of the Chinese system. Okay, so they need to address that thing, and maybe we can save ourselves from whole of this gloom scenario, doom and gloom scenario, which is affecting the whole of the markets, US markets and Indian markets. Okay, so today's deleveraging, devaluing of Chinese economy and the deflationary scenario which is there in China and its impact for the India and the whole of the world, we talked about that. We'll meet in next session. Until then, just take care of yourself. Bye bye.